What's up, everybody? You are now watching the BarBites podcast, the podcast for law students looking to life hack their legal careers by learning from some of the most successful lawyers and hearing what steps they took to get to where they are today. I'm your host, Michael Goldfaden, founder of the plaintiff's personal injury law firm, Goldfaden Law, located here in San Diego, California. Our guest today is Ben Coughlan. Ben is one of the most prominent plaintiff's personal injury attorneys in the San Diego area and has made a name for himself in the highly contentious field of brain and spinal injury cases. He has worked as a partner at Gomez Trial Attorneys for the better part of the last decade and has recently formed his own firm, Coughlan and Vinel. Ben is a former vice president of the San Diego Brain Injury Foundation, a faculty member for the National Institute of Trial Advocacy, as well as a member of the adjunct faculty here at USD. And did I also mention that he's a published author in his free time as well? Ben, I'd like to give a warm BarBites welcome to you, and thank you so much for being here today.
I appreciate you having me.
No problem at all. I like to give our guests a little bit of a background just as far as why I'm doing this podcast and really what I'm trying to accomplish here. The podcast is intended for law students, and what we're intending to do is really just give them a glimpse into the life of a successful trial attorney and what career steps and paths they took to get to where they are today. So I think a lot of our guests are tuning in today to find out about how you climbed the ranks of a behemoth firm like Gomez Trial Attorneys, how you made a niche for yourself in this specialty field of brain injury cases, which are obviously very tough cases to make a name for yourself in, and really what went into your decision-making to start a firm of your own. So to get started today, I'll just ask you why personal injury law and brain injuries in particular.
Yeah, well, it's a much longer and more complicated story for me.
Good, we've got time.
Good. This is not my first career. I actually raised by two lawyers. One who was a litigator and trial lawyer here in San Diego, and my mom who does real estate work. And so most of my life, I planned not to be a lawyer and did everything I could to avoid becoming a lawyer. Not that I didn't care for the law or think what they did was noble. I always did. But, when your parents are prominent in something, you sometimes want to just try to make a name for yourself. It's not until you get a little bit older, you realize that none of that matters, right? So, my background is in journalism. I went to Northwestern where I was a journalism major. I worked in television for a little bit, realizing that the very competitive field of broadcast journalism would require me to live in the Paducah, Kentuckys of the world. No offense to anyone from Paducah, but it just wasn't for me after being in Chicago and doing that. And so to journalists, I turned maybe to what you call the dark side and started in the PR world and worked at some very neat places in Chicago, very wonderful public relations from there, which I parlayed into some work with the Chicago Bears football team, and then wound up back in my hometown in the media relations department of the San Diego Padres for almost 4 years, which was a lot of fun. But to me, something was always missing. And I think it was, growing up, seeing that that what my dad had done, really fulfilled him, where he felt like he had real meaning and purpose. Felt like that was a little bit missing in sports, as fun as my job was. And so I decided to go to law school, but really with the intent of getting a law degree and going back into sports, back into baseball in particular, more on the analytical end. A lot of people don't know this, but actually many people in baseball operations and baseball have law degrees.
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with Theo Epstein, and now the former president of the Cubs and former general manager of the Red Sox, he actually had my job at the Padres before I did. Went to USD Law, To say the least, we ended up in slightly different places. But what happened was when I started going to law school, my plan was still really to go back into sports. And I had a friend who happened to be really interested in trial work, who had signed up for what was, I don't know if it's still there, I assume it is, but the intramural mock trial tournament. Even though my dad was a trial lawyer, I knew very little about the ins and outs of trial work. As a first year law student, I certainly knew nothing about evidence. But her friend or her teammate for that tournament had dropped out the day before the tournament. And fortuitously for me, she asked if I would join. I immediately said no. And she was really sad because she wanted to do it. So I agreed ultimately after really saying no. Set foot in the courtroom, and from then on, I've been hooked. That's really how it started, was doing the intramural mock trial tournament my first year. From there on, I joined the mock trial team at USD, which brought me a lot of joy in law school. I was a little bit older, of course, than a lot of law students when I attended, but it brought me a lot of joy getting to do that, getting to compete, which fed some of my competitive spirit. And I was lucky enough to get a job with the legendary Bob Grimes, legendary criminal defense attorney here in San Diego, and his daughter Dana Grimes, also a USD grad and one of the finest trial lawyers practicing in San Diego today, hired me after my first year of law school. And I ended up getting to be part of trials with them, major criminal trials in San Diego while still in law school. And I just, kept falling more and more in love with the courtroom. After that, I I went to my dad and I said, I really like criminal defense, and I think that's what I want to do, but I should try civil litigation. I'm a first-year law student. I didn't know what that meant. At that
Wait,
time.
you didn't have it all figured out?
No. And, I tell my students now, there is no necessity whatsoever to figure these things out early. But, I went to him and I said, maybe I should try civil just to make sure I don't like it. Civil being like, to me, that it made sense. And, of course, my dad looks at me sideways. Well, any specifics more you can give me than that? And all I said was, I want to try cases. And he said, well, then you got to go work for John Gomez. I said, oh, well, do you know him? Do you have any connections? And he didn't, and I went back to Dana Grimes and I was telling her this story, which I thought was funny. And she happened to know John, called him for me, and I was in his office for an interview the next day. So,
wow.
It's one of those things where in life, and I tell my students at USD Law now, luck is not a bad thing. Being connected is not a bad thing. The mistake you make is not allowing yourself to be in the community where you can meet these people that can help you. And I'm sure we can talk more about that later, but ultimately, I went there to Gomez originally, still thinking I'd go back to criminal defense. Right from the very beginning, I got to work on some very high profile, complicated injury cases. And anyone who does this knows that pretty quickly you see that every day you go to work and you're helping people.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's many other areas of law you get to do that in. And so getting to see that I got to work with real people, getting to help real people, often going through the toughest times of their lives, and try cases on top of that, I knew within a week that's what I wanted to do with my life.
Wow.
And so it was that quick for me. I've, that's what, almost 10 years ago now. And here I am. I now have my own firm. I'm, working on cases with my partner and best friend, and it doesn't get a whole lot better than this. For a living, I get to come to work and help people. And that's really as simple as it gets.
Yeah.
It's when you find something you love, grab onto it.
That's it's an interesting path that you've taken, and I can speak from coming from a family of attorneys as well. My father practiced personal injury law in New Jersey for about 35 years before retiring a few years ago. My sister does personal injury law in New York, so I know exactly what you're talking about, where you come from a background where this is a life that you can have if you want it, but you kind of want to see if there's something else out there and make a name for yourself first. You've given us a lot to unpack, Ben, and I want to just bring you back to a couple of things that I think that you said that were super interesting. First off, the marketing job or the media relations job that you had with the Padres. How did you get into that? And it's a very unique background to come from this journalism major that you had at Northwestern, and then this media relations job that you had at the Padres. What was that transition like when you went from media relations into law, and really what sparked the transition?
Yeah, it is obviously you're two very different careers, but I think I had a massive advantage going into law school, quite honestly. And I often when people come to me and ask if they should attend law school or if they're thinking about it, I respond that for me, law school, I didn't find to be overly difficult or overly stressful.
Why
I think
is
that's
that?
because I had life experience. I think it made a big difference, having had to fend for myself for 5-6 years before I went back to law school. Supporting myself, living on my own, being outside the bubble of college, I think that was a huge advantage for me going into law school, because I just treated law school like a job. And I think if you look at it that way and you think about it as, I'm just putting in hours like anyone else does, then you don't overcomplicate things. In my view, from seeing a lot of how my friends handled law school, how I TA'd in law school too, how a lot of my students back then, and then now a lot of my students as a faculty member at USD handle law school, is that they are stressed because they overcomplicate things. And if you take a moment to breathe and break things down and put things into perspective, I think that you give yourself a really big advantage in that atmosphere. And so, yes, the two professions are very different, but for me, I think having that life experience helped a lot. I got married my second year of law school. I wasn't, I took it seriously, but I kept it in perspective, and I think I had the double advantage of, understanding too, and I think this is also a huge mistake law students make. I had the understanding, because I had already been in the professional world, that so much of your success will come from the contacts you make and the time and energy you put in to meeting people in the community in which you want to work. And so I did spend a lot of time while in law school getting to know lawyers in the community, in different areas of law, and spending time understanding really what the practice of law looked like. Because I don't think law school does a great job of teaching you that. And that, to me, I think kind of with, as I already discussed, having a decent perspective on what law school is, those combined, I think made law school a little bit easier for me than for some, and made that transition from a different career a little bit easier.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, that you were part of the mock trial team here at USD, which, is one of the classes that I coach for and take part in now. I also did that in law school. And, for me, mock trial was what got me into trial law, wanting to be a litigator and wanting to be in the courtroom. I assume it had the same effect on you. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience at, with the mock trial program? I'm going to kind of promote it here through you. And then also talk to us about some of the other either classes or internships that you've taken here at USD that have really kind of inspired you and had an effect on your career.
Sure. Well, certainly for me, mock trial was just a ton of fun. And I think that goes back to what I was saying previously in that, that's one way of uncomplicating things in law school, right? Instead of worrying so much, all these added hours I'm putting in, instead seeing it as, hey, this is something I enjoy doing within the law. I think even though mock trial is a lot of hours, it really actually helped me de-stress in a lot of ways. It might sound odd, but finding something you enjoy to do and build experience at that, was helpful to me. And not to mention, I made some of my closest friends. I mean, you're working pretty long hours in mock trial, and still some of my very closest friends are mock trialers, and including many of your co-coaches right now are some of my closest friends. So for me, mock trial was something I look back on law school and think very fondly of. Does it prepare you to try your first case when you leave school? Definitely not. I don't think that's the purpose of it, though.
And how so? I mean, what is it about real trial work that's different? Because I've actually heard competing theories on this. When we had BB Fell on, for example, she said that she was surprised to learn just how similar actual trial was in terms of its raw components, right? Like how to conduct a cross-examination or a direct exam or give an opening statement. But then there's also a lot more that goes on behind the scenes in trial work that you don't get to experience as a mock trial student. So what about it do you say is dissimilar or doesn't
Sure.
prepare?
Well, and just so you know, BB is one of my best friends, and we've actually tried 2 cases together.
I do know that. Yes, she speaks very highly of you.
Yeah, don't let her fool you. I don't think BB was a mock trialer in law school. I believe BB was a moot courter.
And this must have been from her NIDA trial experience. So it might be a little bit different with their mock trial versions.
Sure. I mean, I think certainly learning the basics of trial, it's very helpful for that, right? Learning how to ask leading questions, learning what an opening statement, closing argument should look like. And it certainly has a ton of value. I think the things that are certainly dissimilar, of course, are in the mock trial world, you're living in a closed world. And in real life that doesn't exist. And I can tell you some really scary stories about things you learn in the middle of trial that send your blood pressure through the roof that you don't have to worry about in a mock trial. And, understanding, I think too, and I have seen this with some of the people I used to do mock trial with too, that wound up trying cases afterwards, and I don't think this is because of a lack of coaching or teaching. I think it's because you're living in a closed world with a closed file. Is that you don't learn, I think, the most important aspect of trial work, which is storytelling to me. And I say that in a much broader sense than just telling a story. I'm talking about telling a story that 12 people, 12 strangers sitting in a box can understand and relate to, and learning how to do that. I think comes with 2 things. To be really great at it, I should say. And BB is really great at this, by the way. And that is, 1, understanding that the people you're speaking with do not come from the same background as you. And so their life experiences are different. And so they are interpreting your words differently than you might mean them. Whereas in mock trial, you are being judged by other lawyers and judges. Okay, that's number 1. The second thing is, I think in mock trial, the goal is to score points, right? And to do that, you want to follow a certain rubric to a certain extent. Where in real trial, to me, the greatest trial lawyers are those who have an ability to be themselves and to express the story they are trying to convey through a believable and understandable way. And it can't be forced. And I think that is just something, one, that some people have and some people don't, but two, that you still need to spend an extraordinary amount of time working on. And I don't think the law school setting allows for that necessarily. And so I have a tremendous respect for mock trial. And if you want to be a trial lawyer, I think you should do it because you will learn a ton that will go into trials. Just don't expect your jurors to be as kind as the lawyers who are judging you in mock trial might be.
Fair enough. Who are some of the lawyers that you see in the courtroom that do a good job exemplifying exactly what you're talking about? Who are some of the best storytellers out there now that you will go watch at trial and strive to be like?
I mean, I've been so lucky, man. I've been so lucky to get to try cases with some of the very, very best there are in Southern California and really across the country. The first case I ever got to try was with Bob Grimes. And it doesn't get much more legendary in San Diego than that. And to watch him interact with a jury when he was doing this, to watch how jurors just soaked up every word he said, changed me dramatically. Getting to see that, because it was so different from what you learn in law school and being on a mock trial team. And it's so much more about communication and interpretation. And to me, seeing someone that could be that genuine and speak with that much kindness while defending someone who had been accused of some pretty horrible crimes, was almost a miracle to me to see the first time I saw it. And then after, working with Bob, the next, when I moved over to the civil side, the first trial I got to work on was with Robert Hamparian, a legend himself, as big a name in the trial law world as there is in San Diego right now and for the last 2 decades. The next case I tried was with John Gomez and Jeremiah Lowe. 3 Trial Lawyer of the Year awards among the 2 of them, and then after that, I tried several cases with B.B. Fell, who, if you haven't seen B.B. in a courtroom, it's something to behold, and I think what I took, and certainly I've gotten to see other legends do this. I've seen and gotten to consult with Bob Simon on cases. I've watched Mark Lanier in trial, who's the greatest ever, maybe. I've gotten to see some just absolute incredible trialers, including hearing stories from my dad, who in his own right, was an incredible trial lawyer his whole life. And so, the thing I take from all of them, and this is something I tell both law students and young lawyers that I work with, because I also teach young lawyers and I mentor young lawyers, is that, the great ones, it's not something you can read in a book, right? And there are great trial books, but put them in their place. The thing you learn from all of these great trial lawyers and trying cases with them and seeing what they do is that they all have their own personalities. They are all individuals. They all are themselves in a courtroom. And unfortunately, law school does this very strange thing to us. It makes us think we have to speak like this different language and complicate things way more than they need to be complicated. The truth is that the great trial lawyers have an ability to distill things down, to communicate concepts very clearly and very simply. Trials should not be complicated. Certainly, if you're on the plaintiff's end, they should not be complicated. But a lot of young lawyers have trouble seeing the forest through the trees because they've read, 30 books and, David Ball says this and Nick Rowley says that. Those are all wonderful people to take lessons from, to learn from. But I think if you were sitting right next to any of the greats, what they tell you is you got to find your own voice. And I don't think, in my opinion, you can be a great trial lawyer until you've found your own voice.
That's a really good piece of advice. I think that you have certainly, it sounds like, been very fortunate in terms of the mentors that you've had throughout your career, whether it was in terms of your first few jobs that you've had, or if you've had a parent who's in the profession, partners at your firm who have taken you under their wing. It's one of the things that I hear from a lot of our guests on here who have become really successful. It seems like almost every single successful attorney has had that type of mentorship. If you're a student right now in law school, what would you say is the best way to go about getting that type of mentor? I mean, are there classes that stand out to you that you have taken at USD, or professors that you have, had at USD that have really impacted you in the earlier part of your career, really before you graduated? Are there things that law students can do now in order to try to cultivate some of that mentorship?
Oh, you're taking me back. Thinking back to law school. I got to put my.
We're going to go even further in a second.
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. So let me say this first. Mentorship can mean a lot of different things. The way I mentor a young lawyer may be totally different than the way someone else mentors a young lawyer. And that's because we're different personalities, right? And so I think a mistake that is often made by law students is they find a lawyer who interests them, that they want to be around and work with them, but that person may not, have all the time in the world to sit down and explain everything that's going on. I didn't have mentors early in my career on the civil side, that were sitting down with me and saying, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. And looking back, I'm actually very grateful for that, because what happened when I started practicing was that our firm was really expanding at that time. And I was thrown in and just had to do it. And I made mistakes, and I learned from those mistakes. There were stressful days and anxiety-ridden nights because of that, but that's okay. Doing and failing, but then learning from it, to me, is the best way to learn. And I think if it weren't for that, you're in it at the moment and you're like, hey, why isn't anybody helping me with this stuff? But now looking back, I think that's the greatest gift anyone gave me. I had great people surrounding me, but I think I was lucky that there was enough trust in me very early on that was capable enough to just handle things. And so that, I was forced to learn how to put the case together from the very beginning. I will also say, I think I was very fortunate when I passed the bar, again, years ago. I had been working on a large brain injury case at the time, as, I guess what you call it, a post-bar law clerk is what they call it. And the case was coming right up to trial. And I was actually in the middle of a 3.5-month trial in Riverside when I got my bar results.
Wow.
And I think the results come out on a Friday. Is that right? Friday?
Yeah, they like to torture the law students that way, just either making or hurting the rest of their weekend.
Right. That's right. Okay. So I had gotten my results on a Friday night. And in fact, We had my best friend was getting married in Chicago. I had left Riverside Friday morning because we were dark, flown to Chicago for the wedding on Saturday, and was planning to fly back to Riverside for trial on Sunday. And so I got my results while I was in Chicago at my friend's rehearsal dinner. I immediately after, shedding a few happy tears, called Jeremiah Lowe and John Gomez, who I was trying the case with, and told them I had passed. And to my surprise, they said, "Okay, great, you have the first witness on Monday." And that was true. I flew back to Riverside. They had the trial judge swear me in.
Wow.
And my first thing I ever did in a trial was the direct examination of our expert economist. That was my introduction to being a lawyer. And so I say that because I think, one, it demonstrates that just doing it helps you learn. But two, as a lawyer, I actually saw trials before I ever did depots, before I ever did discovery on my own, and so I think that seeing that big picture and how it comes together before, I went into the, nitty gritty day-to-day practice of law was a massive advantage for me. And I think I just got lucky, again, with that. In terms of like great mentors or classes in law school, I think USD offers certainly a lot of great classes and there's a lot of great professors. My legal writing professor really stood out for me, still does. I still, every year or so shoot her an email thanking her, Wendy Garawal. And I know she's still there. She was just a big influence on me. And it was actually her first year teaching was my first year of law school.
Oh, cool.
And I just always have felt very grateful to her for any number of things, not only because she was a great teacher, but, one thing she did in our legal research and writing class, and I think that, again, is often missed in law school, is she spent a lot of time when we would learn concepts or learn cases or learn law, explain to us how that worked in actual practice. And I think for any young lawyers out there right now, first, second, third, fourth year lawyers, I hear them constantly say, the practice of law is just completely different than law school. And that's right. It is. And I don't know when or if that'll ever be fixed. But I think the funny part to me is that so many people are still surprised by that. Right. And so, I think combining, that experience I got right away, with good teachers and other people in the legal community who have been so gracious to me throughout my career, who have always, and I try to do the same thing because of it, said, look, if you have questions, pick up the phone and call. And that's another little lesson for law students and young lawyers. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Okay. If you have people that you can count on and mentors that want you to learn and help, sometimes it's a little easier just to ask the question. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make.
Yeah. And Ben, you actually mentioned something that I think is so important that is lost on a lot of law students. It's that ability to see the forest for the trees, right? And the experience that you had in the beginning of your career, actually getting to try a case and seeing what it looks like at the finish line, I think really helps with every other aspect of being a lawyer, right? Because 99% of the time you're not in trial, right? Even if you're at a very highly litigious law firm, you're spending most of that time either preparing for trial or doing all of the things necessary just to get you to that finish line. And, I think it's great. One of the classes that they teach here at USD now is this experiential advocacy practicum that I don't know if they had when you were a student here.
No, but I'm an adjunct to the class right now.
There you go. And I think I may have even taught with you for it one time with some overlap there. But I think it's a great class because it really does show a law student from their first semester of their 1L year, what to do, how to do a client intake, how to conduct a cross-examination or do a closing argument. And I think those skills that you and I maybe got while we were in mock trial, a lot of students don't have that opportunity. And I love the fact that this school in particular is sort of pushing that on students to say, hey.
Linda Lane was a friend of mine who I knew from teaching at NITA. And when she told me that she was planning to start that class, I just thought it was such a terrific idea because I think it is necessary for any number of reasons, even people that don't want to litigate, even people that don't want to be lawyers. The way law school is taught, you don't really know what it's like to be a lawyer. And no, that class doesn't teach you everything, but it gives you some perspective. And so I think it's a tremendously important class. It's why I agreed to teach it. And I think the law students now that are getting that, because I certainly didn't, are very, very lucky to have that class.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And it's interesting to see how when a student takes a deposition, let's say as a 1L, you kind of lose sight or you don't really necessarily even know what it is until you're then in trial and realizing that, oh, that deposition, that thing that I took however many months ago is going to play an important part and role in my direct or cross-examination here. So I think it's fantastic. Ben, let me just take you back a little bit further because it seems like you are obviously a well-educated guy. You've got a background where you went to college at Northwestern. You practice a pretty complicated area of the law. Have you always been a good student? I mean, what would your teachers say about you back in elementary school or high school?
I like the euphemistic language you are using. You're asking me if I'm a nerd. I guess I have always been a cross between a nerd and an athlete. I loved sports. Baseball's always been my first love, but played multiple sports my whole life. And I think a lot of my competitive energy comes from that. But it was instilled in me very young, the importance of school. I think probably my parents will tell you, I always was a little scared of getting in trouble too. So I always did my homework, but I was genuinely interested in school for most of my life. In particular, books and history, English, politics, a little less so math and science, although now that's a huge regret I have because medicine now is one of my true loves and what I do. If I could go back and do it again, I'd probably take every science course I could possibly take just because I truly love it now. But yeah, I think I always did pretty well in school and balanced that, with my competitive side. So I think it's fair to say I was a nerd, sure.
You said that you were kind of the kid that always did the right thing or behaved a little bit. Did you come from a family of siblings? Did you have some siblings growing up, and were you the?
Oh well, I don't know that I always behaved. I was very good at getting away with things.
Oh, there you go. Huge difference. All right.
That's being the trial lawyer's son, I guess.
Right.
I had a healthy fear of authority, let's say, at a younger age. But I had my moments certainly, and. In college and my 20s, I was not a very serious person for an extended period of time, and we could just leave it at that. But I think you live and you learn, and life goes on. And I think having children of my own now, all you want is what's best for them, right? You want them to be okay. That's really all you end up, once you're a parent, everything else really ceases to matter other than, are my kids okay? And so, looking back and seeing how I was raised, and I feel very fortunate, that to have parents that valued education. And so that's meaningful to me. And I think I was just lucky in that regard.
What did your parents say when you told them that you wanted to go to law school? Were they excited about it? Did they try to dissuade you from the profession, or were they happy that you were following in their footsteps?
My mom my mom, as long as I was okay, my mom was always fine, and I will say,
she sounds like a good mom then.
She's an incredible mom. And, she was, always my biggest fan. She has been my biggest fan my whole life. And so I'm very lucky there. My dad was a trial lawyer, and a very well-known trial lawyer in San Diego. And, so I was often asked, are you going to be a lawyer? People just kind of assumed it, I guess. But he never pushed me once, to his credit. And, he'll probably listen to this at some point. He is a brilliant guy, and a stubborn human being. But he never once in my life pushed me to be a lawyer. He never once pushed me to do anything I didn't want to do. And I think he was very proud that, I went the journalism route and, worked at the Padres. And I do remember actually when I told him I had decided to go to law school, it was actually at a Padres game. And I didn't know how he was going to take it, quite honestly. It's funny to look back. It's so long ago now, but I didn't know how he was going to take it. And he was, I think, happy, but, I don't think in a way that it was because he wanted me to do it. I think he was happy because I seemed happy about it. And so again, it's just a lucky place to be. And, throughout law school, I would, there were a few professors, Sean Martin, I'm looking at you, who would pick on me because of who my dad was. But he never, he never overstepped when I was in law school. If I had questions, I could go to him, but he never pushed anything on me. He and I certainly disagreed on a lot of things, and that was fine. But I think more than anything, he was just a good resource to have.
What do you think lies in store for your two kids, or Jack and Mackenzie, right?
Mm-hmm. Man,
what do you think? Are they the third generation lawyers of San Diego? You think that they'll go that same route, or do you?
It's so funny, I think before they were born, I'd have told you, if someone asked, do you want your kids to be a lawyer? I'd probably say, no. The stress is a lot. I want them to do something less stressful. The truth is now, I want them to do whatever makes them happy. I want them to do whatever gives them fulfillment. And if that's the law, or if that's anything else, that's perfectly fine with me. I said what I meant earlier, or I meant what I said earlier, which is, that you just want your kids to be okay. And, I think if they are doing something that makes them happy and gives them fulfillment, I will be just fine.
That's a good answer. That's the right answer, by the way.
One thing I'll tell you, about parenting, there are no right answers. With a toddler, I learned that the hard way every single day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I have, I'm in that stage of my life where all of my my friends are having children, and my sister's having children of her own. And I think you're right. It's the common theme. You want your kids to just be okay. And that's the way my parents raised me, and that's how I'm hoping to raise my future kids. So,
Man, I'll tell you, it's great being a lawyer and getting to help people every day and doing something that inspires, and hopefully my kids are proud of me. But honestly, it doesn't mean one lick compared to being a parent. It's the best job in the world. And there's, to me, there is nothing that gives me greater happiness than opening the door and seeing my kids' faces. Even if it's my son yelling, "Daddy, I don't like hugs anymore," there's still nothing better than that. But, there is an aspect to doing what I do that I do feel like I'm making them proud, and that does matter to me.
So talk to us about that, Ben, because obviously you're involved in an area of the law that is, it can be very traumatic, right? You deal with traumatic brain injury cases all the time. And I would assume that being a father now probably helps in the way in which you're able to describe the impact that something like a brain injury can have on certainly a child's life or a person's life in general. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? I mean, how did you first get into such a serious area of the law, and how did you take that first experience and become the expert in it that you are right now?
Well, certainly I've kind of become known for my work in head injuries and serious spinal injuries. But I have litigated and tried all sorts of different kinds of injury cases. I've done everything from toxic exposures to medical malpractices, to major construction accidents, and everything from, pinky fingers to broken backs, to brain bleeds, to deaths. And so, you see a lot in what we do, certainly. And it can stay with you, and it can stick with you, right? And it can be traumatic as well. And so I think there is perspective necessary to do this type of work, right? And I understand that that's not for everyone. But for me, I think that the way I compartmentalize and am able to deal with hearing horrific stories and spending time with families that have lost a loved one or that have a loved one suffering a brain injury, is that I take the time to really understand that we are all our own people. We are all our own individuals, and we all handle and deal with things differently. And so, yes, that can be difficult at times, but the way you compartmentalize it is to realize that this is a job very few people get to do. This is a job where if I can make someone's life just a little bit better, I then am getting to do something that such a small percent of the population gets to do. And if I can make a living doing that, there's really not a whole lot better. And the truth is, and the reason I've started my firm, why Casey and I started this firm, is actually spending time with the families, spending time with the victims is our favorite part of what we do. And that may not be true for everyone, but for me, the thing I've realized in, doing this for a decade is that in order to tell someone's story, you have to know them. And I don't mean go spend a little bit of time at their home and, see where, they, eat their dinner and what books they're reading. I mean, spend time, get to know someone, understand how they are comprehending their own injury, understand the impact it had on their life, not by a doctor writing down the injury, not by a life care planner telling you the things they can't do, but by that person showing you, hey, this is what my life used to be, and this is my life now. I love that aspect of my job. I feel a particular gratitude that people allow me into their lives to learn about them and to get to tell their story. And I feel an incredible amount of gratitude for the trust people put in me to do that. And so when you realize that someone is, trusting you to tell their story and to explain to people who are literally paid to want to not give them what they deserve, then you can put a lot of pressure on yourself, sure, but you also realize that what we do is tremendously important. And that there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about that. And every time someone lets me into their life and spend time with them, I thank them for that, because yes, even though it's my job, it's still a lot for a person who's gone through a traumatic event to let someone in, right? So I know that only answered part of your question. I think the other part of your question was about how I kind of formed this, subspecialty, I guess you'd call it, or become known for, handling a lot of serious brain injury cases.
Yeah. And Ben, if I can jump in, I don't mean to compartmentalize your practice, because obviously you have achieved success in a wide area of the law in many different practice areas of personal injury, which is impressive in and of itself. But you have certainly made a name for yourself in the Southern California area, if not the greater surrounding area, with this subspecialty that we're talking about with these brain injury cases. Like you're saying, you, I believe, took part in a trial that I watched down here with Bob Simon, where he consulted with you on a pretty serious brain injury case. You are regarded as an attorney that many other successful attorneys look to for advice in this particular field. And so without pigeonholing you into that as your only practice area, which is not what I mean at all, I think there's something to be said about doing that, right? Our field of personal injury law it's a feeding frenzy for a lot of solo practitioner attorneys, for a lot of people in this congested market of trying to make a name for themselves. So, it can't have just been luck. And I know that that we mentioned that, you may have had a few cases in the beginning of your career, but it takes a special type of person to be presented with an opportunity and to turn it into something more. So, how did you go from that first case that you had with a brain injury and really take it to that next level?
Yeah, and well, I appreciate your kind words, and I don't mind being pigeonholed. It's we all do what we can for our clients, right? And so, if somebody comes to me with one thing or another, I'm either happy to help them myself, or I'm going to spend the time to find who the right lawyers they need to be with. And I'm perfectly fine turning down cases if I think someone else is better than me at that. And I think that's a mistake a lot of personal injury lawyers make. And I should say this now, and then I'll get back to your brain injury question, is that it's okay when a case comes through the door to say, hey, my friend Michael Goldfaden is better at this type of case than me. And I think that makes an excellent lawyer, to realize that they can help their client more by finding an expert on those kinds of cases, or by finding a trial lawyer that handles those cases better. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, Michael. How I got into brain injury cases is interesting. So that first case on the civil end I told you about with Robert Hamparian, I was just a law clerk, a second-year law clerk at the time, happened to be a brain injury case. And then as I was still clerking, a couple of attorneys at the firm were working on another brain injury case. And at the time, a doctor had performed a PET scan, which was a diagnostic tool, an imaging technique, primarily used to detect cancer, but was using it to determine if there were signs of traumatic brain injury, mild traumatic brain injury. And I was asked by one of the lawyers at the firm while I was clerking to oppose an eliminate motion of the defense, which was a Kelly Fry motion, to exclude that evidence of our client's PET scan. And so I started working on that. The case did ultimately go to trial. They used my briefing on that motion, and we won. And I believe that we were the first in the state of California to have a PET scan admitted over objection in a mild traumatic brain injury case. And since then, they've been used quite a bit. That's a number of years ago now. And so I think what happened was internally at the firm, because I had just kind of done these brain injury cases and really started to learn and understand the medicine, that from very early on, if other brain injury cases were coming into the firm, I was being assigned to those cases. And what I did on my end that hopefully is helpful to your students or others listening is that I ran with that in the sense that I treated it, and it was actually through a doctor friend that, I had a conversation. I don't know if I was already a lawyer or not, or still clerking at the time, but I was sitting outside a courtroom preparing this doctor for his testimony in trial. And, I somehow the subject came up talking about, what he does to stay up to date on medicine. And he's like, well, I read every journal and every article that comes out on it. And I do, continuing education on things. And I think it was back then that I just kind of thought to myself is, why is it any different to be a lawyer, right? And if I'm someone who's going to be working on brain injury cases, I should know the medicine better than anyone else other than maybe the doctor. Unfortunately, at this point in my career, a decade later, I think unfortunately some doctors whose depositions I take, I know the medicine better than. I don't say that to discourage any doctors. I say that because brain injury medicine has changed a lot. And I spend an enormous amount of time keeping an up-to-date library on medicine. And so that's how it started was, internally, I was getting brought in on these cases. In my free time, I was reading every single thing I could about the brain, about the spine, about the nervous system, understand. And you got to remember, this is someone who probably hadn't taken a science class since high school, learning and trying to do all of this. And so I started doing stuff online and finding everything I could. And, and so as I was doing more and more cases, it's kind of like the practice of law, right? You go in, you learn your first year, how to case cite and how to do IRAC and all of that. Well, it was no different. I learned how to speak brain injury. And so when doctors would call me to talk about my clients, I was understanding it better and better and better. Multiply that times 10 years, and that's been every day for me. And, I've made a lot of connections. I know the best doctors in the country. I, know the best academics. It's just become something that not only interested me, but has become a life calling. And so I don't mind being pigeonholed in that way because I enjoy it. And I think the biggest thing for me is you can learn all the medicine in the world. And I feel my partner and I both have great understanding of the medicine, but it's the ability to take that and then relay it to your clients to help them to understand, what they're going through. Because often brain injury clients and their families really struggle with understanding their new realities. And then being able to take that back, what you're getting from the clients, and communicate it to the defense or to the insurance company, and then ultimately to a jury. Right. So medicine is part of it, but the time where I really grew up and where I think I really kind of went from someone that, did these types of cases all the time and was kind of had this niche, to feeling extraordinarily confident in any brain injury case that came my way, and any deponent or expert you put in front of me that I need to cross-examine, was when I understood that, that it's more than just the medicine. It's more than how you just work up the case. It is still ultimately about your client and about what they are going through. And yes, using the medicine to understand that, but to recognize that it really goes a step further than that. And really goes 4 or 5 steps further than, and understanding that, I think, has ultimately given me the confidence, not only to, handle the biggest brain injury cases, and to feel confident to do so, but to also start my own firm. And what Casey and I are doing here is we really are trying to change the way personal injury lawyers do things, particularly in brain injury cases, by understanding this relationship between the medicine and the person and the story. It's been an adventure, and it's been a lot of learning and education, but it's also been self-growth that have got me, long story longer to answer your question about how I got, in this niche. It is about understanding my abilities or the areas I'm weak, in order to best tell my client's story.
It's such a great point that you make, Ben, because there's a reason why we have continuing legal education classes that we're required to take every year, right? That this profession is constantly changing, and likewise, doctors have to take CME credits, continuing medical education credits. And there really is no reason why an attorney who's practicing in this field should not be just as educated on the changes that are taking place in medicine. So I applaud you for doing that. My old mentor at my old law firm actually specialized in shoulder dystocia cases. And he came from a family where both of his parents were doctors, and would always tell me the same thing. He would read the medical journals and learn the language of medicine that is so difficult for attorneys, usually something attorneys just rely on their own experts for. So to learn that language and to understand it, and then, like you're saying, be able to communicate it, not just to a jury and opposing counsel, but to your own client, to get them to understand really what's going on, is just such an important quality.
I was watching, there's a great trial lawyer in Los Angeles named Gary Dordick, and he's wonderful on brain injuries as well. And I was listening to a program he did, 7-8 months ago. And he said, if you're doing brain injury cases, and you are not reading all of the newest literature and understanding all of the medicine, that's malpractice. And I really agreed with that, because, there are certain things people try to fake, but when you have someone's life in your hands, we need to be careful, and we need to do what's best for our clients. And so I think what he said was really wise, in the sense that it's not that hard to spend the extra time educating ourselves on the cases we're doing. And for me, that may be brain injuries, but for someone else, it may be shoulder dystocia, or it might be, toxic exposure. Whatever it is, our job as trial lawyers is to become an expert in something new in every single case. And that makes it fun too. I don't want to overwhelm anyone listening. That's kind of the fun part, right? Yeah. I did a case where it involved, them using dynamite to blow up the ground to build homes, right? And a rock flew and hit my client. But we became experts on geology and physics and explosions. You know, it's also the really cool part about being a litigator. You get to just become an expert in something new all the time, and that's really fun.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's probably nice not only for our law students to hear, but for a lot of attorneys who have gone out and either started their own thing or are not at a firm like the first few firms that you worked at, where you have all of these exciting cases. A lot of attorneys end up doing rear-end car collision cases, right? Or at least personal injury attorneys. And it's probably exciting for an attorney to hear that concept, that this area of the law, just because it's personal injury, it goes well beyond soft tissue rear-end car collision type cases, right? That you can become an expert in whatever you're passionate about by finding the right case and making a name for yourself in that particular field. Then I want to just get to something that you mentioned as well, where you know, you were a partner at Gomez and objectively a very, very successful attorney there. Yet you have decided to go out on your own and start your own practice. I mean, that takes a special type of person, I think, to just start your own practice in general, but especially coming from a background where you're at the top of your game and yet you're leaving that place to go start something of your own. Can you talk to us about that and really what went into that decision and why did you decide to leave when you did?
Sure. And, you know, I think you said it really well. It is a tough decision, right? It was a decision that was based for me on what I wanted to do with my future. And that certainly had a lot to do with where I'm at in my life. But it also had to do with just the way I wanted to practice. And, you know, I am so grateful to all of my former partners, you know, and to John Gomez and also to every lawyer who has helped me along the way, because they've made me the lawyer I am. Having said that, you know, there is a certain way I like to work up a case. And there is a certain way I like to work with my clients. And regardless of the firm you are in, if it's not you running the show, to some extent, you know, you are still at the whim of the way things are done at that firm. Obviously, Gomez Trial Attorneys is a phenomenal firm that gets phenomenal results, and it's built with a lot of really talented trial lawyers. And I thrived there, I think, in part because I was able to form a team where we kind of built out the way we like to do build up cases and work up cases. But what ultimately happened was I wanted to take that creativity, and I think Casey and I tend to work up cases in a very creative way where we like to give clients a lot of personal attention. And in order to do that, Casey and I started talking about, well, how is that done? And the first thing that came to our mind was, well, you can't always have maximum number of cases if you want to give maximum personal attention to your clients. And so I think that was the start of it, was just determining the way we wanted to litigate and try cases. Just happened to be a different vision than the way my former firm was doing it. It doesn't mean that the way they do it is wrong. It just means the way Casey and I wanted to do it was different.
Hmm.
And I'm proud we made that decision, because the way we are now building up cases really is in our own image, both who we are as people and who we are as trial lawyers. And we are doing things in a way that I don't think have been done before in brain injury cases in particular, but in injury cases, personal injury cases in general too. And that's not to say that that's the best way for anyone else to do it, but my experience tells me that my clients are going to get the best results because of the way Casey and I are doing that. And that's because of the way Casey and I saw this grow as we kind of built this out while still at that firm. I know that's kind of complicated, and I'm trying in some level to kind of get you into my head.
No, that's
I mean,
exactly
there's also
what I'm asking. I think that you know, it sounds like both you and Casey are certainly entrepreneurial people, right? And willing. I mean, it comes with being a trial attorney in general, just this ability to take risks and to try new things. But how do you, you know, for our law students listening who maybe want to start their own practice, how do you know when it's the right time to go out on your own? I mean, we can sit here and say, hey, as soon as you graduate law school, if you want to start your own business, you can do that, but it's not always the best idea. So how did you know when it was the right time?
That's the $1 million question, Michael, for sure. And if I had, you know, an answer that fit for everyone, I'd gladly give it. And I would hope that, you know, somebody would write it down and everybody would use it. The truth is, for me, that I knew when I knew. And that time for me was very different than Casey. You know, Casey is several years less practice time than me. You know, and obviously she was ready a lot earlier than I was, right? And so I think for me, that time was when I was confident enough that, of course, first and foremost, that I could support my family doing it, because that for me is the most important thing. And then two, that I had the confidence that any client that came to me would be getting the best representation they could get anywhere. And I truly believe that. I believe that any client that Casey and I take on are getting the best possible representation they can in this community. If I didn't think that, I wouldn't take the case. And so to me, I needed to get to that point and have that confidence in knowing that before I could have gone out and started my own firm. Because if you look at the oath we take as lawyers, and if you look at the responsibilities we have to the rule of law, our job is to work on behalf of other people. And if I'm going to work on behalf of other people, and I think someone else could do it better, then why in the world am I doing it? I am not giving my client the best representation possible. Then I am a big enough man to say they should go somewhere else. So for me, it took me getting to that place where I thought, you know, if someone came to me, I can better represent them than anywhere else they can go. It's not to say I'm a better attorney than anyone else. It's simply to say that I had the confidence in myself and in Casey and what we built to believe that in my heart. And that is also the reason that when cases come in that I could handle, but that I think someone else may be better suited to give that client the best representation, I refer those cases out. And that was part of starting this firm too, in all honesty, is that, you know, there might be cases that at my former firm we would have kept, but now I can say, because I get to decide and Casey gets to decide together, hey, you know what? You're better off with Michael, or you're better off with BB Fell, or you're better off with Andrew Chavinsky, you know, and that's okay to admit that as a lawyer. And so that's ultimately how I got to that point. But I think that for everybody, it's going to be different. Like I said, when you know, that's what it took for me.
Well, then let me ask you this question, Ben, because I think it naturally flows from that. If you are ready when you're ready, because you're actually one of the first or only guests I think that I've had on who has started his own firm immediately by forming a partnership. So how do you choose the right partner, and what attributes in particular does Casey embody that you decided this is going to be something that works really well for me and together?
The two most compassionate people I know in my life are my wife, Kathleen, and my partner, Casey. That's why I chose Casey. It's really as simple as that. To be great at this, you must be compassionate. And so I met Casey when she was actually volunteering at the National Institute for Trial Advocacy. I told you earlier, law students don't get out there and just do stuff enough. She was like a gopher. Basically, that's what she did. Go for coffee, go give this to someone, and she was volunteering to do that so that she could be around great lawyers and judges. Well, anyone who knows Casey, it takes you about 3 seconds to be impressed. And so I met her while she was doing that. I was, in my 5th, 6th year, I don't know, something like that. And it was just so apparent how intelligent she was, how much she cared about people. I mean, even just to the point how much she cared that this event where she was a volunteer went off without a hitch, right? And so I said to her, after a few days, I said, I think she was at the time, must have been a 2nd-year law student. I said, what do you want to do? What do you care about? And I remember her telling me a story about her dad. And her dad, if you don't know, is a renowned journalist, now for USA Today, formerly for the Arizona Republic. And she talked about how much truth mattered to her and to her family. I'll never forget that. It sticks out in my mind. I can't even remember what we were talking about. But you're hearing this person who was very young. She had gone from college to law school, but just well beyond her years, talking about truth in such a compassionate way that you just couldn't help be impressed. And I went to some of the other instructors, and I said, who is this? And everybody, all of them just said, I know, isn't she incredible? And so I actually went up to her and started saying, hey, do you have law clerk applications out? What do you want to do? Kind of just teasing around, kind of hoping she'd ask me if we were hiring. And she, at the time, had just gotten a job with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And if you don't, Casey also was at the very top of her class at USD. She said, but I don't have anything, I don't know if it was the fall or summer. I don't remember what semester it was. I said, well, I do the clerk hiring at my firm. Would you be interested in applying? And I couldn't tell if she was excited or not at first. She later told me she really was. But long
got
story
a good poker
short,
face.
yeah, she applied. I had already decided I wanted her before she even applied, as had BB, who also taught at NITA and actually runs that program. We had talked about it and said, we'd be so lucky to have her. Casey started clerking for all the attorneys at the firm, impressed the you-know-what out of every single person at the firm. And so when it came time to determine whether we were keeping law clerks on as lawyers, it was, I don't even think it was discussed among the partnership for more than like 2 seconds. It was like an automatic yes for her. And she started, that was at the point where I took on a leadership role at the firm and she was on my team. We formed a team. So she was my associate. And that's now several years ago, and we haven't been apart since. I jokingly say to people, I'm not sure either of us at this point would know how to practice without the other. And so, yes, I get asked a lot, why did you take on a partner that's more mouths to feed. But the truth is, to me, I never would have done it without her. She is as much of me and my practice of law as I am at this point. And she is become one of my very closest friends. And, it's funny. We have lots of other friends that do what we do. They will sit in on meetings where we have like mutual clients and stuff. And it's almost like Casey and I like verbally don't even need to say anything a lot. We've been working together so long. Yeah. So, when you ask me why did I take her, the real answer is there was never a thought not to partner with her.
It's so interesting. It's refreshing to hear, Ben, because I do hear that all the time from a lot of people who have gone out on their own, but aren't necessarily open to this idea of partnership. It's just so refreshing to hear from someone. I don't look at it like more mouths to feed. I don't look at it like that. I see my version of the practice of law with this person, right? And hearing you describe her being compassionate and caring about clients, it's just, now I'm hearing you describe your partnership together. It just speaks volumes about your character as well. So
I'd also add that she's far smarter than me.
A smart man.
I mean, the truth is, people often, I get this question a lot, and you're an injury lawyer too. You probably get this question a lot. If you got injured, who would you hire to represent you? And without a doubt, my answer would be Casey.
There you go.
And so, I know how talented she is. I know how brilliant she is, because I get to see it every day. So, again, you say that it says something about me, but really I think it says a lot more about her.
Well, let me ask you this. I'll ask this as sort of the last part now of talking about your own firm and starting your own firm, because I think the three main questions that I hear from students the most is, when is it the right time to start your own thing, if that's what you're going to do? How do you know whether to go out on your own or form a partnership? And the third key thing is, how do you know, or how do you go about getting business? Okay. And I think that it kind of naturally follows from this idea of, well, if you're experienced and you make a name for yourself, that's a great way to get referrals. That's the way our industry is set up, is this referral-based industry. But what sort of strategies do you guys utilize in terms of marketing? There's that age-old question: should we advertise and put our faces on billboards and go that route, or do we want to take this this other route of word of mouth as a way to get business? How do you guys go about doing that, and what's your philosophy on the matter?
You figure it out, let me know, man.
Great answer. I love that. I like that you made me sweat out my whole question before answering like that. It's great.
No, I'll give you my thoughts on it. Let me grab a drink of water real quick.
Of course. Yeah, please.
And then,
please.
All right. So the question is, how do you bring in business, basically? And it's, that's definitely what keeps me up at night. There's no doubt. And so I think it really depends on what you want your firm to look like, if you're the person in charge of that. Casey and I, as we were planning out our firm, spent weeks thinking about that. My wife is a marketing professional and works with law firms, so we kind of have that built in, which is nice. And she's brilliant and told us all the mistakes we were making, and that was helpful as well, of course. But has also guided us, down the path of the best way to do things. And so, there's this constant balancing when you have your firm, and I'd say running any kind of business, between the money that you have, the money that you want, and how to get from one spot to the other, right? Do I risk money now to hopefully bring in money later, is kind of the basic question, right? And that's more my marketing background, my PR background saying that. What Casey and I did when we started our firm is we said, well, okay, that's not what we're going to focus on, because to us, at least initially, what is important is creating the image of who we want to be. And then on top of that, proving ourselves through that image. A lot of people, lawyers, can say that they're the greatest, or that they're the best at this or the best at that, but you got to go prove it. And Casey and I, as a new firm, very much wanted to create an image that we could back up with successes that we would have. And so for us, you know, in marketing and advertising, you can often, you know, if you really simplify, you can break things down into, there's two different paths, right? There's name recognition. How much does the outside world know you, right? So if you're Budweiser, right, people already know you, right? You're every commercial you do is not because people don't know Budweiser. They see a commercial and then they know Budweiser, right? And then there's this other aspect of it that's more about creating brand loyalty or building image, right? Casey and I decided that for us, you know, we're likely never going to be a big advertising firm. We're probably not going to be posting billboards and, you know, spending a fortune on SEO, because name recognition in the general public was not what we decided was important for us. What we decided was important for us was being really good at the things we say we're really good at. Right, and so this somewhat goes back to what we talked about earlier, you know, in the sense that, hey, you know, if we are going to do this, let's do it in our own image, in the way we want to build it, in the way we're really good at, so we can get the best results. And if we can market ourselves in that way, create this loyalty amongst a professional community and the legal community, and then prove ourselves and earn it, to us, that will bring in more of the types of cases we are looking for, okay? There is nothing, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with advertising if that's what lawyers want to do. There's nothing wrong with being on billboards. There's nothing wrong with being on television if that's what you want to do. It just wasn't what we wanted to do. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time thinking about that. And so we have a marketing budget. You know, my wife won't tell me what that budget is. I just should. So my wife is also the better numbers person. That's where that joke comes from. But we spend a lot more time talking about the value of any marketing opportunity than how many eyeballs it's going to get in front of, right? Are we doing some sort of message? Are we creating some sort of message, whether it be online or wherever, that is portraying the image of us that we want out there in the world? If the answer is yes, then we're okay doing that. If the answer is no, then that's not an opportunity we move forward with.
It's so true, and it's such an important thing for a young lawyer who is thinking about starting their own practice to think about, because, you know, lawyers, we have this stigma that we are not good business people, right? You're either a good lawyer or a good business person. So it's very refreshing, and it's nice to hear that there are law firms out there who are thinking about this strategically, right? Not just getting in over their head with caseload and, hey, just send us every single case that you can. You know, it seems like being very strategic about it. So I would hope that any people listening in would try to, copy a little bit of that strategy themselves. Ben, we're going to kind of move to the next part or the end of our podcast here. I like to ask our guests about a couple of things, a couple questions that I think is just fun. It doesn't necessarily have to be about law, but what's next for you, and what are you most excited about that's coming up in the near future?
Well, I think with COVID, having the courts open would be every lawyer's right answer right now. But let's take that aside, right? But man, I sure do miss the courtroom. No, what's next for me professionally certainly is seeing where this journey and this new firm takes us. And the first 4 months we were open, Casey was actually on maternity leave too. So she's only been back about 2 weeks. And, I will say the last 2 weeks have been the most fun since we started the firm, having our team back together. But yeah, just seeing where this adventure takes us and what's next for us, both in COVID world and beyond that. And I know it's kind of a generic answer, but it's the truth too. When you start your own firm, as you know, Michael, it's your baby, right? It's the difference in working at a place and having ownership of a place is tremendous. And you feel it the moment, you sign that paper, opening the bank account or establishing your entity, and it's a cool feeling. So I think just seeing where the next year takes us professionally, is what I'm looking forward to. Personally, it's just watching my kids grow up, man. It's, my wife and I are so lucky. We have 2 wonderful little ones. My son, Jack, is 3, and he is just a loving, very intelligent little boy, and keeps us on our toes, but just brings us a tremendous amount of happiness. And so just watching all the new things he's learning and there's nothing like it. And then my daughter Mackenzie just turned 1. She's basically been a COVID baby, although she was born before it. She only knows about a dozen people. Wow. So I think seeing her blossom and get to experience more of the world is certainly high on my list of things I'm looking forward to.
I love those 2 names, by the way. Jack and Mackenzie, I think are awesome names. I've loved the name Jack in particular for a boy forever, and Mackenzie I only associate with good people that I know. So I love those names. Yeah, and congratulations to Casey as well, if she's listening in on this, for having her child. I don't know if it was her
baby
first.
Luna. Baby Luna.
Baby Luna? Oh, I love that.
Girl. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
His husband, Nico, who is a tremendous human being in his own right, is French. And Luna is, they wanted a name, as I understand it, and you'll have to talk to Casey about it further, that celebrated both of their backgrounds. And but Luna is such a sweet little girl, and she, of course she would be, because she comes from 2 amazing parents.
Oh, that's awesome. Ben, how about books that you would recommend to any people listening in, whether they're legal books or if you're the type of lawyer who just reads enough for his profession, anything non-legal that you would recommend, or audiobooks or podcasts, whatever is your fancy that you would recommend for our guests?
Well, like I said earlier, I'm a pretty big nerd, so I love to read. And my particular areas of interest, I guess, surprise, happen to be in neurosciences and cognitive behavior and stuff like that. So I won't bore you with any of those. One book that really I think for anyone in the legal profession, or anyone that has a business or is in a management role, that really changed my life. And honest to goodness, I think it really should be mandatory reading for just about anyone, is Give and Take by Adam Grant. You can also see him on a TED Talk, but Give and Take is a book that really spoke to me. It's a study about how very successful people. He basically breaks down people into three categories in the professional world: givers, takers, and then this kind of middle group, which takes up the most. And that being a giver, someone that helps others, but does so not because they're expecting anything back, but because they genuinely want to help and because they want to see the growth of their industry, actually creates a lot more long-term success. And I don't want to give away the whole book, but for me, that it's a book that really changed the way I looked at a lot of things and kind of supported a way that I already felt about the world, but I thought wouldn't get me very far. And so to see it put down in writing was, special. And so I just think it's something everyone should read, Give and Take by Adam Grant. In terms of legal books, I mentioned earlier that I am a huge proponent of reading whatever you can get your hands on, but taking nothing too seriously, okay? Because we're all our own people, and you're not going to be Nick Rowley just by reading Running with the Bulls. You're not going to be David Ball just by reading Damages. These are lawyers who have spent years and years trying cases and are phenomenal because they can be themselves in a courtroom. And so while I'm happy to give you a couple, I say it with the caveat of take bits and pieces of everything, but figure out how it works for you in your style and the way you litigate and try cases. And so the two for me, I already mentioned one, but as a plaintiff's lawyer, David Ball's Damages is the Bible to me. And there's a lot of stuff that's been written since it, but I think for any new lawyer, especially in this profession, it's just an absolute must. And then for me, there's a great book on cross-examination. It's called Cross-Examination by Terrence McCarthy. He's a former federal defender in Chicago. And it's a book to me that actually taught me a lot more than just about how to cross-examine. It's only about this thick. So it's a quick read, but I've read it probably 15, 20 times. I take lessons from it into depositions, into discovery I do, into trial. And so it's one of those things where even though it's about cross-examination, to me, it ended up being more about how to communicate. And so for trial lawyers, those are the two I'd recommend.
Yeah, I say that these books are for our listeners, but if you can't tell, I'm just taking some notes as you're as you're giving them to me, because I selfishly want to read some of these books as well. That Give and Take book by Grant sounds.
Pick it up today. You won't put it down. I'm telling you, it's a life changer.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And I actually, the last guest that I had on recommended a book that I have since read and finished before having you on. So I certainly will read that. Ben, where can people find you? Are you on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? Do you want to give us a telephone number or your
Sure.
or your website that people can reach out?
Sure. So the website is www.sandiegolawyers.com. Real easy.
Fantastic website.
We were excited to get that one. Our office phone number is 619-436-1990. I am on Facebook and Instagram. We have 3 different ways to find me. Of course, my personal pages, just Ben Coughlan. Then we have our firm page, Coughlan and Vinel, on both. And then I keep a separate profile on both Instagram and Facebook called Concussion Counsel, where I talk about brain injury cases, brain injury, new medicine. I post stuff to help other lawyers, doing those types of cases. My belief, like I said earlier, is, in this community, we should all be helping each other. It should not be competitive. We're all out for the same thing. And so if any lawyer needs help, they're always welcome to call me, whether it's about brain injuries or it's about, just coming out of law school and working cases. Even if you're in law school, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to help, and as is Casey, and we built our firm on that basis.
Yeah, and I can speak to that myself, having called you about a case last week. Ben is certainly a fantastic resource. So I would encourage any of our listeners to reach out if you have any questions or anything at all, interesting cases that you think that they might be willing to take on. Ben, I just want to thank you again for being here. To all of our guests, I'm going to sign off now. You've been listening to the BarBites podcast with our special guest, Ben Coughlan, today. I'm your host, Michael Goldfaden. Thank you again for listening in, and we'll see you next week.